Some things in life have impossible decisions, and some people in this world have to make some sort of how to decide them. In the continent of Africa, there is no easy solution. If there was, somebody would have already executed a flawless strategy to bring the Africans out of poverty and desperation. However, some ideas are better than others. The best plan for revival of African countries is to have an international task force implement a plan to increase spending in education, continue to help through foreign aid, exterminate rebel militia, and add basic tech. To make sure that something gets done in Africa, the task to fix the continent should come first by the Africans themselves. For any plan to be successful, they need to concur with the idea that Africa is in a state of extreme degradation and poverty. Just like the rejection of a heart during surgery, the Africans may very well reject the advice of other countries. If they do this, there is no solution to the problem in the foreseeable future. Another important idea is who is helping the Africans get on their feet. This problem is not the work of a single nation. All developed countries need to come together under a banner like the United Nations and negotiate the best possible way to help those in need. It is easier said than done to get the entire world behind a single plan, as it is nearly impossible to please everyone. However, if the African nations accept United Nations assistance, there is still hope. One of the most important things to do in Africa is increase the overall importance of education. If children are educated about the world they lived in, they would have a much better understanding of the world around them. They would be able to make much wiser decisions with the education they learn through school. This would also provide a way out, so to speak. Many Africans have no skills to get them out of the mess they're in. However, if a certain individual scores that of a prodigy, then they should be awarded and at least recognized for their stellar yet stunning achievements. More education will also add jobs to occupations that need an education to run. For example, if the government needs a software engineer, there are not going to be many software engineers readily available if many Africans cannot even read. But with the right education, small and big businesses alike will be able to prosper over the talent and hard work of the African society. The best way to do this is to first build schools around the bigger cities, so more children are exposed to a proper education. As time goes on, schools may begin to be built around the more rural Africa. Something else that must be done is how the United Nations needs to get the African parents on their side. Maybe through a verbal presentation, the United Nations must convince the parents of children to let them go to school. Without parental approval, no students will attend school. African children should start school as soon as possible before they encounter the propaganda they see all around them. The less they know about African manipulation, the better. The problem with this idea is that if foreign money begins to pour in, the rebel militias and enemies of the state will either vandalize or overtake the schools they encounter. This puts extreme danger on the students of the schools and creates a risk factor. The students can risk going to school at the expense that they will never come home to their families. Regardless, education is vital to the African revival. It is common knowledge that Africa receives a plethora of foreign aid. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Africa annually receives over $50 billion in foreign aid just by the United States and the United Kingdom alone. With this money, Africans can get the basic necessities for life, such as food, clean water, and clothes. No developed countries should add to the already abundant African foreign aid package. Too much money from outside countries will not resolve the problem that is dwelling in the continent. Not only will it not resolve it, it may make the problem worse. The last thing that developed nations want is an entire continent that is dependent on them to survive. However, for the country to get on its feet, a foreign aid package is critically important. The biggest current threat to Africa right now is the ever-impacting rebel influence around. Naturally, the continent has been run on a tribal government for the duration of its life as a segment of land. There are two main offenses: radical Islamist groups and tribal groups. Firstly, radical Islamist groups such as Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and most recently ISIS threaten the existence of the continent. They have spread from the Middle East and continue to spread on into Europe and Africa. If these groups get the Africans behind them, nothing will get better in Africa or the rest of the world. The last thing the United Nations want is a continent that's been united by the very men that threaten disaster to the rest of the world. Tribal groups also play a reason to rebel activity. Conflict breaks out, whether it be the color of one's skin, previous persecution, or other reasons. Tribes or even entire ethnicities completely eradicate each other. To stop rebel groups, the United Nations needs to put boots on the ground and eradicate rebel influence. The usage of drone bombing at direct targets is also recommended. There are already boots on the ground. The number of troops right now should increase by about 1.5-fold. To stop African genocide, Africans must be educated how their murders solve nothing, and how it really only leads to more bloodshed. This should be instilled into students in school at a young age. In any case, for whatever it takes, developed countries must be able to put an end to the pointless conflict. Too many people take technology for granted. They walk into a room with light and think nothing of it. However, at least 50% of Africans don't even have access to electricity. That number rises to as high as 95% in the rougher countries like Liberia and Chad. With access to technology like clean water, electricity, sewage, and the internet, Africans may have the chance to live an overall better life. The main problem to this can be summed up in one word: power. It would not be easy, but eventually the Africans need to evolve into a state where they use electricity and technology like other countries. If you install electricity into 100% of Nigerian households, who's to say that some group can take over the power plants and charge outrageous taxes to those who use that electricity? This solves nothing. Those with the money are fueling the rebel savages, and those who do not have the money to pay off the oligarchs are still without their basic tech. The problem to this idea is the expense of the task. Installing electricity, clean water, or sewage is much more expensive than providing something like food. Not to mention, the technology implemented must be maintained by someone with expertise in the field. Too many things play into the issue of Africa for one idea to rise among the others as the perfect strategy. But if the above ideas are executed, the country has a chance at success. Just like the risk of an African child going to school, there is the off chance that the entire plan caves in on itself and nothing is resolved. However, the developed countries of the world can only do so much to help out. The rest of the push must come deep from within the African soul.